Freedom through action. 3.17 For him whose only love is the self, who delights in the self and is content to the rest in the self, no duty remains. 3.18 Such a person has nothing to gain by performing action in this world, nor anything to lose by not performing it. He is dependent on no one and nothing outside the self. Ego was defined by Paramhansa Yogananda as the soul identified with the body. That identification drives one to action in the false belief that this world is real. These stanzas are not meant to imply that enlightened souls cease from acting. God himself, the divine playwright, after all, wrote, staged, directed, and acts all the parts in his great drama of the universe. The purpose of the drama is to lead everyone gradually to the denouncement of realizing that it was all simply a show in which all acted but were never really involved. He is satisfied if they want to become reabsorbed in him after the curtain closes and oneness with him has been achieved. He needs workers in the field, however, is therefore pleased also with those who want to stay on here out of a desireless desire to help him with the production of the play. The important thing is not to act with ego motivation. Our separateness from God is an illusion. Every thought we think, every deed we perform, every desire we harbor is only a reflection of his infinite consciousness. The human playwright writes all the parts in his drama. His play may need a villain; if not, it will certainly need characters who are antithetic to others. Without dramatic tension, there can be no drama, and the work won't hold the audience's interest. Indeed, if the playwright is good as his métier, he actually enjoys writing also the parts of villains, for it takes skill to show the inherent logic of evil from its own point of view. At the heart of everything that happens anywhere, there is a hidden secret, divine joy, without which the universe could not have been manifested. People who are attached to their bodies cry out in anguish, but there can't be joy in suffering. What stories they tell later, however. Almost proudly they speak of those every times when they suffered the most in their own lives. Everything is to varying degrees of manifestation, bliss itself. The very capacity to suffer is an indication of the more refined capacity to experience bliss. Suffering comes primarily from the thought, things ought not to be like this. Inherent in suffering itself, in other words, is the thought of how things ought to be, and so the soul whispers to them, can be eventually. 3.19 Therefore, be conscientious during the performance of all actions, whether physical or spiritual, to act without attachment. By activity without self-interest, one attains the supreme. Physical actions are performed by engaging the life force on a material level of reality. Spiritual actions are performed by withdrawing the life force from the physical body. To act spiritually in this world means to be conscious of the indwelling self and to radiate that inner consciousness outward to others and to the world. Attachment is the pathway to bondage. Non attachment is the key to liberation. I once asked my guru, who had in past incarnation he told us performed roles of major importance in the world, whether a master always retained the high state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi when he was sent to do an active work in the world. His answer was significant. One never loses the inner consciousness of being free. 3.20 By the path of right action alone, Raja, Janaka, and others like him, karma yogis, attain perfection. To offer guidance to others, you too should be active. King Janaka was in fact already an enlightened yogi and a liberated soul from previous lives. His mission was worldly, but it was to set an example of right action for unenlightened soul, to do one's duty conscientiously but without attachment. Lahiri Mahasaya also often quoted the great Rishi Astavakra's teaching: if you want to achieve freedom from reincarnation, abhor sense pleasure as you would sugar coated poison, and be as devotedly attached to the act of forgiveness, pity, contentment, and love of truth and God as to drinking nectar. The highest sattvic attitude, of course, is to be impersonal, to forgive, pity, feel contentment, and love truth and God. All this impersonally without referring anything back to your own ego. In forgiveness, for example, never think, I am doing the forgiving, for in that thought, pride can enter the mind. Direct the flow of all your energy and attention outward towards the person you are forgiving. 3.21 Whatever the superior being does, lesser being imitate, his behavior sets the standard for right living in the world. The arrangement of this scripture into separate stanzas make it possible from time to time to interrupt its flow with extraneous ideas. In this stanza, we find not only a reason offered to spiritual people for living by high principles, but an answer to the common reproach worldly people often address to them. If you are so concerned with doing a good thing, why don't you do more for the upliftment of mankind? The very common criticism is a rationale that often dissuades idealistic people from the spiritual search. Why don't you do more for others? It is astonishing how many ways there are of doing good in this world without really accomplishing anything worthwhile at all. Think of the war chest of political parties. Money accumulated by people who believe this person or that will change everything for the better. Is any lasting good ever accomplished? That question hardly needs to be answered. Plus ka change, said the French. Plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain unchanged. Think of the ardor with which people campaign to get others to behave as they ought to. People who shout slogans angrily, mounting huge parades, spending vast amount of money to persuade everyone to stop fighting. Will anger keep anyone at peace? Will merely banning the bomb bring a stop to war? Even if people had nothing but pitchforks, So long as the emotions could be aroused to anger, they would continue to fight. And people who are eager to fight will certainly seek the best ways of winning they can find. As an example of almost ridiculous folly, at least it would be ridiculous if it hadn't also caused so much suffering. Think of modern communism. Russia and China between them have slaughtered an estimated 100 million of their own people with a view to imposing on them a philosophy supposed to promote the greatest good for the greatest number. What needs changing is not social systems, but human consciousness. The best way to change society surely would be to create little societies that can inspire others to make the recommended changes individually in themselves rather than forcing everyone to march in lockstep togetherness towards some general good that often ends in disaster. If an example works, others may be inspired by it and may want to change. Without the desire to change, no one will ever do better at anything. The first responsibility the universe places on every person's soldier is change yourself. One moon, it had been pointed out, gives more light than all the stars. One transformed human being has a more beneficial impact on others than 1,000 people campaigning for improvements, which, when the shouting is over, often leave everything no more changed than when a deck of cards is reshuffled. Even a brief overview of history shows persuasively that in only one field of endeavor had there been consistency. The one and only impact on society with long lasting beneficial effect had been in the field of religion. There have, of course, been wars and persecutions in the name of God. This can and must be blamed on human nature, not on teachings that tell them to love God and to be at peace with one another. Imperfect human beings eager for battle will use the name of God as a slogan, not as an expression of devotion, and therefore in vain. God never endorses such religious beliefs. People all too easily, however, infect one another with their own imperfections. The true Savior of human beings have ever brought to this world the one and only influence that has succeeded in permanently improving anything. All great teachers have stated that man's first duty is to improve himself, not to inflict his own opinion about self improvement on others. They have also said, however, that true improvement is really possible only in a higher unitive consciousness. Most of them, with the exception that is of Buddha, who, as we have shown elsewhere, was by no means in disagreement with them, have added that permanent upliftment is possible only with the assistance and inspiration of God. One way to improve oneself is to offer to others without imposing on them whatever genuine inspiration one has found. To share that inspiration with others is the best good work one can do, provided one does it in a spirit of inner freedom. If one seeks God alone without doing anything else for humanity, he will, in any case, like the full moon against a field of much dimmer stars, have done greater wonders for the whole human race than any politician after winning his campaign for election. A sage who, after a lifetime, the task indeed requires many lifetime, arrives at the direct perception of God and achieves the state of oneness with Him, need not make a move to help anyone. Even without doing so, his life should be a supernatural blessing on the world. One who acts in the world, however, as an example of divine love, forgiveness, peace, and divine joy will be imitated by countless others. His impact on society as a whole will be incalculably great. Every spiritual seeker must understand that there is nothing greater that he can accomplish for others than that very thing he is already doing. When such a seeker attains final liberation, so my Guru told me, 7 generations of his family in both directions are freed also. Such is the immediate glory harvested from his attainment. What then of the disciples? Oh, they come first, was my Guru's answer to that question. The freedom of one's family member is not final liberation. Rather, it is something like what happens when a person becomes an emperor and his close relative rise higher in society. Those are greatest among human beings who help to bring masses to God. In this way only can a master's greatness be acclaimed. It is outstanding among other masters only for the good he does on earth. Otherwise, every Jivan Mukta have achieved Nirvikalpa Samadhi is as great as the greatest Siddha or perfected being. He may have past karma to work out, even so, he is one with God, and there are no gradations of oneness. There is another distinction between one perfected master and another. One who is an ascended master, having attained that state in the present lifetime, has the spiritual power to free only a few others. A Jivan Mukta who returns to earth to continue working out his past karma and from that level also to guide his disciples also has limited divine power compared to one who is fully liberated to uplift the human race. One, on the other hand, who achieves full liberation yet preserves the desireless desire unselfishly to bring understanding to the world and is therefore born again in perfect freedom, comes back with limitless spiritual power. Such a person is an avatar. Only one who achieved final liberation in a former life deserves that appellation. An avatar is a universal savior like Krishna, Buddha, Jesus Christ. Thousands, indeed millions, at least in theory, though there are never millions at any one time who actually seek God, can be carried to God by such a one as a powerful railway locomotive is capable of pulling a very long train behind it. 3.22 O son of Pritha, Arjuna, no further duty compels me. There is no state left for me to attain, and nothing in these three worlds, material, astral, causal, for me to gain. Yet still I work on for the upliftment of others. There, where all such good work is done, am I. This passage contains two meanings, overt and covert. Overtly, Krishna is saying, free though I am, I still work in this body for the benefit of others. More esoterically, he is saying, I, the infinite spirit, am at the heart of all spiritually uplifting work everywhere. The point is that in any truly good work, God already is that work. The devotee who serves God sincerely with loving devotion need never be anxious that God might possibly be displeased with him. 3.23 O Partha, Arjuna, if I were to cease acting in creation for even a moment, men too would imitate my inactivity. How can any unenlightened person know whether God is active or not? Krishna is saying that he, the divine, living as an avatar in a human body, is deliberately setting an example of how men ought to live. Many spiritual teachers counsel their followers to consider rather the actionless state of the Supreme Spirit, and if they want to attain that state, to remain inactive themselves. Such is not Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita, because this important aspect of his teaching has been qualified by those who insist that all activity is a delusion. The question may remain in some people's mind: what is right action or inaction? In what Krishna says merely an opinion, or has it perhaps been misinterpreted? Is he talking to a more worldly state of consciousness, offering a compromise, in other words, that people will accept more readily? One answer is to go to the tamasic places where activity is at a minimum. Opium dens, for example, and bars, where people go only to get drunk. The torpid effect of such inactivity can be deadening. It may turn even the energetic in a short while into human turtles. This important subject will be addressed again more than once. Here it may be emphasized that Krishna was speaking not to worldly people but to Arjuna, whom he himself called Prince of Devotees. The point here is that one need not actually behold God engage in activity. How his avatars behave should be man's best teacher, and although the teaching varies in certain ways according to the needs of the time, all of them have taught the same basic truths, and all have been in one way or another active, simply in order to set mankind an example. The example of the energy they devote to helping people are what inspire their followers to express more energy in their own lives. If I were to cease being active in cosmic creation, the universe itself would cease to exist. Confusion would result and mankind would be brought to ruin. There are two kinds of pralaya, or cosmic dissolution, partial and complete. Complete dissolutions, of which Krishna speaks only glancingly here, his main topic now being the need for right action leading to release from karmic involvement, means the total withdrawal of all vibrational manifestation at the end of a day of Brahma, the aeon long period of cosmic manifestation, which is followed by an equally long night of Brahma. Krishna is speaking here of partial dissolution. In discussing the need of God's presence in man's life and of the ruin that would result without divine inspiration. Partial dissolution is a diminished manifestation of God's conscious manifestation, with waxing chaos and the gradual ruin of mankind. The first sentence of this stanza touch only lightly on total dissolution, as if to remind us that without God nothing worthwhile could be achieved. The second sentence, in its reference to partial dissolution, makes it clear that more than anything else, mankind needs God. God's partial withdrawal from outward manifestations signifies a weakening of that magnetic power which draws people upward towards enlightenment. Were there no such upward draw, human nature itself would have little or nothing to lift it. Mankind needs divine grace, without which he might never turn to goodness, unless indeed temporarily under the influence of suffering. These few stanzas remind the devotee not to depend on human power and intelligence alone. Ego-inspired activity, though seemingly justified by common sense, is doomed to disappoint and at the end of every attempt and leads in time to disaster. Yogananda explained in his Gita commentaries that in an ocean there sometimes appears areas of relative calmness where the surface may even for a time appear as smooth as glass. Normally on the ocean surface there is agitation and sometimes great agitation. Similarly, there are places on earth where sattva guna, the elevating quality, is predominant. Others where rajo guna, the activating quality, is pronounced. And still others where tamo guna, the darkening quality, reigns supreme. Where sattva guna is withdrawn or obscured, mankind sinks into ruin. There are ages called yugas during which people are relatively enlightened, others where they are primarily active in promoting their own interests, and still others where spiritual darkness prevails, during which period warfare, hatred, and violence are the norm. There are also whole galaxies that manifest predominantly only one of the three gunas or qualities. This is a fascinating subject and will be given the deeper treatment it deserves later on. 3.25 O descendant of Bharata, Arjuna, as foolish people act out of attachment to ego in hope of rewards, so should the wise also act, even if wisdom has lifted them out of any personal need to be active, with dispassion and non attachment in glad service to others as their guides on the path to enlightenment. Never should the wise condemn the ignorant for the ego motivation they manifest. Instead, being themselves enlightened, they should seek only to inspire others in the direction of preferring to perform right dutiful action. The condemnation so often encountered in religious works does quite as much harm as good. The way to help people out of their ignorance is to inspire them with a longing for understanding. To scold them for their ignorance would be like scolding a blind man for his inability to see. Judgmental attitude endanger only the person who harbors them, for though the judgment may seem to proceed from wisdom, it is invariably tinged with an ego inspired sense of superiority, which drags the preacher himself down into great delusion. One's thoughts are colored by whatever clothes he wears. If he wears the gray even of gentle criticism, his own thoughts also may take on a gray hue. If he wears the black of severe condemnation, his thoughts will themselves become darkened. And if he wears the cheerful color of kindness, acceptance, and forgiveness, he will not only inspire others to be like him but also enhance those colors in himself. 3.27 The universal impulse towards activity springs from the three gunas or qualities of nature. Man, however, deluded by egoism, thinks I am the doer. The ego in man tells him, this is my body, yet the cells of this body change over the years again and again. Which body, it may then be asked, is the person himself? Ego tells him, these are my thoughts, yet thoughts come to him unbidden from who knows what source. Paramhansa Yogananda wrote, thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. This person with a darkened consciousness can, with right effort and right influence, develop a light consciousness, which mindset then is truly his own. The characteristic we manifest only seem to be ours. The quality of those characteristics depend on the level of our own energy and consciousness in the spine. To to drive a dark mood out of the mind, for example, try this simple method. Focus your energy and attention strongly at the point between the eyebrows. The magnetism you generate there lifts you out of the fogs of gloom to a higher atmosphere where peace, joy, and complete acceptance reign. Again, if sex temptation assails you, bring the energy up from the lower chakras, especially from the swadhisthana or sacral, to the heart by breathing deeply a few times. Then sit still, as has been suggested above, and focus deeply on the kutastha between the eyebrows. 3.28 O Arjuna, he who understands how the gunas work in human nature and who knows, therefore, that even what the sense perceive depends on their indwelling power of perception, withdraws his mind and removes his attachment to things at the very source of his perception. When a person sees, let us say, something ugly, he might close his eyes and simply refuse to see it. On the other hand, he might withdraw mentally from the perception of it and then deliberately project joy and a oneness of beauty onto everything around him. Thus, the ugliness will not affect him, for he will see it as a manifestation of eternal bliss, which in the last analysis underlies all things. He may even, as the great artist Leonardo da Vinci did, when he beheld ugliness, gazed at it in a new way and see it as an aspect of the divine beauty. I'm not saying that one should be indifferent to ugliness, squalor, and evil when he encounters it. He should not allow anything, however, to disturb his inner peace. Even if he sees wrong in the world and accepts it as a manifestation of Maya, he can remain inwardly undisturbed by it and can work impersonally to improve matters in this world. The practical point here is that if one is himself affected by squalor or evil, he will be far less able to improve anything that he will if he is able to remain inwardly attuned to the flow of God's joy. Withdrawal of the power behind the senses enables one to influence for good whatever he perceives in the world and to act always in a state of inner freedom. 3.29 The man of perfect wisdom should not bewilder the ignorant with his higher perception of the nature of reality. He should bear in mind that deluded as they are by the gunas, they have no choice but to act under that influence. Again, it should be emphasized that one can help others more by inspiring than by scolding them. Sometimes it is true when people are too obtusely arrogant, they may require a good shaking. Thus, even wise masters would sometimes disclaim against delusion if people have become too entrenched in them. Krishna advises persons of higher perception, however, never to let themselves be negatively affected by other people's ignorance. 3.30 Offer to me your every deed, devoid of egotism and desire, inwardly centered in the soul, ever calm and free from worries. Be dutifully engaged in the battle of life. 3.31 True devotees focus on practicing my precepts and the true teaching of others, achieve freedom from all karma. 3.32 Those, however, who scoff at this teaching of mine and refuse to practice it, deluded by ego as to the nature of wisdom, know such persons in their rejection due to ignorance to be courting doom. 3.33 Even the wise act according to the dictates of their own nature. All living beings obey the dictates of nature. Of what avail would be mere suppression? Krishna offered to the world through the Bhagavad Gita not only the highest truths expressed comprehensively and at great length, but a teaching of supreme common sense. This 33rd stanza is a beautiful example of the reasonableness of his teaching. The Lord says to Arjuna, work with things as they are. History. Indeed, perhaps the history of religion, especially, is full of people trying to convince others to be something other than what they are. Wars have been fought, persecutions inflicted, and revolutions stirred up in the name of making people think and become what others think they ought to be. Krishna, in this passage, says very reasonably, work with what is, not with what you think it ought to be. All human suffering is due to the simple thought that thing, things ought to be other than they are. Even great physical pain can be transcended after accepting it as it is. Try this practice. First, calmly recognize its existence. Second, center yourself at the heart of that pain. Finally, simply release it. You will find that complete acceptance of it empowers you to do that relinquishing. Don't let others tell you what you ought in their eyes to be. On the other hand, never dismiss their advice arrogantly. Try at the same time rather to be always true to your own nature. You will never change yourself by suppression. Real change comes only by transcendence. If there is some quality in yourself that you don't like, try to raise your awareness to a higher level. If you find that you simply can't ignore that pain, however, then try to get to the heart of it. When mentally you arrive at its very center, offer the pain up to God. If you practice this suggestion with a strong effort of will, you may find that you can become in an instant a very different person. Okay, I'm going to read this last paragraph one more time. Don't let others tell you what you ought in their eyes to be. On the other hand, never dismiss their advice arrogantly. Try at the same time, rather, to be always true to your nature. Try at the same time, rather, to be always true to your own nature. You will never change yourself by suppression. Real change come only by transcendence. If there is some quality in yourself that you don't like, try to raise your awareness to a higher level. If you find that you simply can't ignore that pain, however, then try to get to the heart of it. When mentally you arrive at its very center, offer the pain up to God. If you practice this suggestion with a strong effort of will, you may find that you can become in an instant a very different person. Attraction and repulsion 3.34 Attraction and repulsion regarding sense object belong to the natural ebb and flow of duality. Beware of them both equally, for they are man's greatest enemy. Attraction and repulsion are extreme form of likes and dislikes. To like anything excessively is virtually by definition just as great an error as to dislike its opposite. The realization of God depends on neutralizing all one's reaction, on leveling out their peaks and their valleys, and seeing the one changeless spirit at the heart of everything. The secret is not to cease from enjoying anything. That solution leads only to apathy and, in consequence, to a deadening of awareness. The secret, rather, is to take every enjoyment into the heart, to feel its cause as lying there in your reactions, and then to draw that energy consciously upward in the spine from the heart to the brain. Ordinary likes and dislikes are not, as such, man's enemies. Rather, they are like troublesome neighbors. Extreme form of these emotions, however strong attraction and violent repulsion, can plunge a person into violent storms of emotion that toss him helplessly about on great waves of delusion. Never let yourself become infatuated. Infatuation is extreme attraction with anything or anyone. Never let yourself hate anything or anyone. Develop an attitude rather of accepting this dream as it is, even if it becomes a nightmare. Your only hope is to escape to a higher level of consciousness. Some people do have ugly traits. Don't waste energy in reacting to them, neither by dislike nor by abhorrence. Don't welcome them into your galaxy of interest. Move through life like a swan, rather of, of whose back the rain flows lightly, never touching its body. Protect your heart's feeling from the excitement of all extreme reaction. Surround those feelings by emanating peace and goodwill. Relax in the heart. Relax also outward from the heart to the soldiers. Then direct your the heart's energy upward through the spine to the brain. When there are people around you shouting angrily, for instance, and especially when they shout personally at you, relax inwardly. Be centered in self. Smile in your heart and remind yourself, I love God alone. Okay, let me read this again. When there are people around you shouting angrily, for instance, and especially when they shout personally at you, relax inwardly, be centered in the self, smile in your heart, and remind yourself, I love God alone. 3.35 To do one's own duty, even unsuccessfully, is better than to do someone else's duty successfully. It is better to die while trying to accomplish one's own duty than to settle for another's duty, though safer and easier, which course is filled with danger and uncertainty. The supreme duty of every man is, of course, to realize the one self, God. One's own path to that realization, however, may be quite different from those of others and from any that others urge upon him. If one hasn't a true guru to tell him what is his own best direction, he should follow that inner prompting which tells him, this is my course to true freedom. Freedom from further involvement in Maya is the highest criterion of virtue. People may mistakenly say, but I feel more joy going in the direction of sense satisfaction. Since they haven't yet experienced divine joy, They may easily be tricked by the mere excitement of sense pleasure. Others say equally erroneously, but when I see this woman or that man, I feel overwhelming love. Surely that feeling must be right. The result, as they proceed along the twisting thoroughfare between birth and death, often takes such individuals very far from their first emotions of infatuation. Inner freedom is therefore the safest moral guideline. Ask yourself inwardly, will I feel freedom in this contemplated enjoyment? Will I feel freedom in this desired love? The next question, of course, is what will I feel free from? Freedom from the pins of desire is not freedom, it is merely momentary relief. One's feeling of freedom must be calm and inwardly expansive. Even so, as Yogananda once explained, people are so skillful in their ignorance. It is hardly safe for ordinary people to trust their own judgment too far. The supreme need for every sincere seeker is the guidance of a true guru. For those who have no such blessing and who have perhaps no deep hunger for God, how shall they recognize their highest duty? The only guideline that may serve them is to ask themselves, will it take me towards greater inner freedom and a sense of having done what was right for me? Arjuna asked, O Krishna, by what is one impelled even against his will to do wrong were forced if he were being forced to do so? Every man surely has experienced times when temptation of various sort seems to be forcing him against his will to act in ways he knows he ought not to. Arjuna's question is universally understandable. Krishna replied, 3.37. Krishna replied, it is desire, it is anger, both of which are impelled by Rajoguna. Know that Know this to be mankind's greatest enemies. The soul is drawn out of itself by attachment to the body, and by resultant ego consciousness by the sense of having a separate individuality. The consciousness of separateness gives rise to feelings of incompleteness. Thus, the gunas which cause the soul to feel that sense of separation in the first place become more active as Rajoguna. Fundamentally, it is the activating impulse which drives people to seek self completion by doing and acquiring things outwardly. Desires come as a result, and because desires once activated can become infinite in number, no one is able to satisfy them all, no matter how wealthy he is. The result of frustrated desire is anger. Thus, it is this desire and anger travel the path of life together. Desire, the eagerness for fulfillment, is never perfectly confident and is always accompanied to some extent thereby by the grim thought. And if I don't get it, question mark. Rising to the surface of consciousness with this thought is always the potential for anger. These twins are mankind's enemies because they rob him of his peace of mind, desiring things. He thinks I won't be completely happy until I have them. Following quickly in the wake of that thought is the agitated fear of possible frustration, anger, and the loss rather than the gain of happiness. 3.38 As fire is obscured by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, as an embryo is enveloped by the womb, so is human understanding obscured by the three qualities. The reference here is to the three gunas. Sattva guna, illustrated by the first example, is easily blown away by a light puff of the breeze of meditation. Even if the smoke concealing a fire is easily dispersed, a dust-covered mirror may need a little elbow grease to clean it, but with the rubbing it can reflect things clearly once more. Rajoguna, therefore, expressed in the right way and with energy comparable to the power of the delusion, can be transformed without too much difficulty. That it reflects the pure image of the spirit. The embryo, however, cannot emerge from its womb until its full time is completed. Even so, when the person in which tamoguna is uppermost, no amount of teaching and no self effort will serve any purpose. Time must simply pass for nature to take its course, bringing that person gradually to the point where, after repeated disappointments and the dim glimmering of hope for the greater understanding, the inner person finally emerges, born with the full dignity of refined humanity. 3.39 O son of Kunti, Arjuna, the constant enemy of the wise are his unquenchable flames of inner desire. The senses, mind, and intellect are declared to be stronghold. Desire through this three deluded the embodied soul and eclipses its wisdom. 3.41 Therefore, O best of the Bharata dynasty, begin by disciplining the senses, withdrawing your energy from them into the spine. Then destroy desire by casting it from your heart. Desire is the sinful destroyer of wisdom and of self realization. 3.42 The senses are declared to be superior to the body, since they convey perception. The mind is superior to the senses, both inner and outer, since it is the perceiver. The discriminating intellect is superior to the mind, since it understands what it perceives, and the self is superior to the discriminating intellect, since it is both perception and understanding. 3.43 O mighty arm Arjuna, thus cognizing the indwelling divine self as superior to intellectual understanding, discipline your lower self, the ego, by dwelling in the true self, and thereby overcome the foe who, wearing the armor of desire, is ever difficult to conquer. Thus ends the third chapter called Karma Yoga of the Upanishad of the Holy Bhagavad Gita, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, discussing yoga and the science of self realization.